ability of the model to operate properly is this credit hour charge. I don't know, a decade ago, the College Board changed all degree majors to 124 hours. There are a few exceptions. There's pharmacy, there's a few engineering programs, but most 99% of all the majors are 124 hours. Do we have any ability to capture how many students we're paying for a fifth year on? Because, I mean, that's basically, as I understand it, there's an enormous opportunity that we are guaranteeing 4 years of college but paying for 5 because of the way students may choose to take courses. And I'm wondering how changing that one thing, and that can have a dramatic impact, it appears to me. But when I look at matriculation rates, 4, 5, 6 year graduation rates, not a whole lot of, I mean, a lot of kids, many kids aren't making it out in 4 years. And so I just wonder if we're paying for 5 years of college when we promised them 4.
That's possible. I think intuition has that information, and it might be in the database that we have. We did not query it. We need to know for certain whether we have it or not. But given what we looked at for the delinquencies, I would suspect that we do have it. And it can certainly be beyond. Now, that's a two-edged sword on that. And in some circumstances, extending career, if you're paying 4 years worth of benefits out over 5 years, that can be a plus or a minus, depending on tuition increase assumptions. If the tuition during that particular person's investment horizon, from contract entrance to graduation, if the overall average tuition increase has been below expectations, stretching it out 1 year actually helps you.
But we aren't paying 4 years of benefits. Because in our system, if you take 12 hours of credit, you're full time.
Yeah,
so we're paying 5 years of benefits over 5 years when we promised them 4.
I really think that's a different issue. I think that issue is, to succinctly say it, is you need to make sure that what you're charging is in sync with the way you're paying it out. And whether it's over 4 years or 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, it doesn't matter. It's just that you've got to make sure that the collection, the pricing model, is the same as the benefit payment model. And that's all that is. It's just a matter of syncing those two models up.
And that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm just wondering how much that moves the numbers, how much of an impact paying for a fifth year is negatively impacting the system.
I think we can probably get at that information. One of the key pieces of missing information that I don't think we have, that we have to collect from the schools, is when the change was made by school. I think that's not in our information anyway. I don't think Treasurer has that information. So,
what do you mean when you change? What
change from the 32 hour to 24 hour?
Well, that happened system-wide 8 or 10 years ago.
Oh. We've heard the impression that it changed school by school.
No, it's a system-wide. All majors in the university system, of all the 8 public institutions, are capped at 124 hours, except for a select few programs. There are a few engineering programs, and maybe 10 degree programs.
Was the block billing also done across the board, or was that school by school? My understanding was that it was done instituted school by school.
I don't know that I understand what you are
Block
asking.
billing where like between 12 and 17 hours costs the same amount. Is that a school policy?
It's a system-wide policy. And I think the policy is anything over 12 hours. I don't think there's a cap. And then the per hour charge is similar as well. We have system-wide policies, not institutional. And we have institutional sticker prices that are different, that have just kind of sort of moved over time. There's pretty good tuition compression across the system. But all the policies are system-wide policies.
Dr. I'm sorry, what did you say about 12 hours, if anything over 12 hours?
Anything over 12 hours is considered full-time. So if you take 12 hours or 18 hours, you pay the same price. Now, we've looked at that. I don't think there's anything out there that says that there's a range of full-time and then full-time plus.
If I could add, I know that when we get billed associated with the program, it's the same price from 12 to 17, and then it's per hour above that. If somebody took 24 hours, it goes up, 18 is this incremental amount more per hour all the way up to however many hours. So I know the program gets billed the same amount from 12 to 17, and 18 on up is incremental by hour. Is how we get billed per student. Now, I don't know.
Let me check on that part.
Right.
And that's what we do from all the schools.
I'll mention one of the things that we looked at the grid, which is basically the information that's coming to the treasurer to reimburse the schools. And I think I was on the phone a lot more clear. We were actually looking at some individuals, and as we were looking at them, we were able to understand some of the charges and not able to understand other of the charges. Some of them seem too low, some of them seem too high. In total, looked all right, but on an individual by individual basis, we actually had trouble making sense out of some of the charges when we tied it back to the annual tuition that we were told was that school's annual tuition. And that's why we basically were talking about the adjudication. Somebody should actually go through and audit that process to make sure that it is what we think it is. That was a little bit beyond what our school project was, but it's a very important piece.
I'm finding out now.
Okay. All right, well, while you're researching that, we'll start talking about this. I think I'm going to pull this up a little bit and look at it in pieces because it's kind of hard to see. We put together this little projection tool. It's essentially a cash modeling tool that kind of takes a look at your program. I'll go down to the bottom here and look at these last few columns here, starting with here. At the beginning of the year, we go year by year. We've got the market value of the assets at the beginning of the year, what we might pay out, basically what we're projecting to pay out if everybody who's eligible to matriculate does matriculate, what we would pay out for the year. The administrative expenses, which are just 5% of the benefits. The projected contract payments, so these are people that are still paying on their contract. So this is a contribution into the system, and this is the market value at the end of the year. So you actually saw something like this, these 4 or 5 columns here, in your prior actuary's report. And it shows that basically you're going to run out of money. And if we take a look at it, and it's these projected payments, if we bring them back to a present value on the valuation date, we're going to be up here. That's the total present value of future tuition and fees. $392 million. That's your obligation. That's what we're talking about. That's what you promised out. If everybody matriculates on time, and all the assumptions are actually realized. Your investment return, your tuition increase assumption, that's the present value. If you had that amount of money right now, and all your assumptions were met, you'd be exactly where you want to be. You'd have exactly the right amount of money. Now, you have a present value of $48,000 in future contributions for current contract holders. That's money coming into the system. Those are contributions coming into the system. And you have $265 million of current assets. So these two pieces together are basically your resources, your current assets plus your future contributions. And as you can see, they don't add up to the total present value. You're short by $79 million, just under $80 million. That's your unfunded liability. You're 79% funded. Another way to look at it is, given these assumptions, if everything works as we're assuming, the fund will run out of money in 2025. And so at that time, if we go down to this flow, we're talking about these negative amounts as assets. If you were to continue, somebody would have to pay for those whether that's the full faith and credit of the state of Mississippi, whether that's future contract holders, but somebody has to come up with these monies to pay for these annual benefit obligations until the last person is out of the program. Now, this is looking at it as a closed group, no new entrants. Okay? Now, I want to go over these assumptions a little bit here. And we've got several assumptions. I've got a few of them labeled as interest rate assumptions. And I'm going to talk briefly about them one at a time here. This one here, this first one that I highlighted here, is the assumed rate of return. We've talked about that before. This is that 7.8% assumption that you have in the valuation. And this is the gross rate of return. And so when we're pricing it, we actually use this number here, the 7.3% rate of return, because we're charging the participants for the 50 basis points of administrative expenses. Now, in the valuation, we're actually using the 7.8% return, and then we're loading the benefit payments that we're expected to be paid out each year by 5%. And in aggregate, that equates out. So we've got this valuation assumption here, and then we've got the tuition increase assumptions here. 6.5% for the four-year colleges, 6% for the junior colleges. Down here, and we can go all the way down, this is what we're going to look at our actual experience. Now, this is a projection. The present value here, this 392, is based on the assumed rate of return at 7.8%. To the extent that your actual rates of return in each future year are different, this number here, the year insolvent, will change. So right now we have them to be the same. And you are solvent until 2025. So one of the things that we looked at, hold this up a little bit here, is in 2013, for fiscal year 2013, it looks like we're going to earn somewhere between a 12 and a 14% rate of return. So if we put in 12 here, it doesn't change things very dramatically. Now, we've talked about our investment. We've talked to our investment consultants, or your investment consultants, and they've given us some short-term expectations for interest rates. And that was 5.5% for the next 6 years, 6.5% for the 2 years after that, and then 7% thereafter. So I'm going to put those in. 6. 7. Now, I didn't change the assumptions. And so basically our funded status is the same, but our year insolvent changed. We went down to 2024. Because we're now not realizing what we're assuming. In fact, on average, we have that number here. This pattern of returns, basically for the remaining life of the group of people that are in there, expected remaining life, yields an average of 7.76%. More than a percentage down, 6.76%. More than a percent down below the assumed rate of return. So what would happen if we actually changed that assumed rate of return to match that? Well, now we've dropped our funding status. We are now down to 74.5% funded, and our unfunded liability is $108 million, 107.8 there. So if we make our assumptions look closer to what our investment consultants' expectations are, which, by the way, are very close to what we came up with in our recommendations, what we're looking at is that you're actually farther in the hole than what your valuation suggests. And you're going to run out of money soon. Now, that's just 12 years out, 11 years out. You're going to have to come up with that money in 11 years. So the question is, where are we going to come up with that? One of the things we might want to look at is, well, this has no new entrants coming into the program. What happens if we just open the program up? Does that help? Well, before changing any of the pricing, let's just add new entrants into the current process. I'm going to put in 1,000 new entrants for university and 300 for junior colleges. And I'm going to basically stop the new entrants here what we have is that the new entrants are entering, in this model, they're entering on average about 7 years before matriculation and taking 7 years to make the payments. And so I have them stop so that the last person's still out in 2034 of this program. So what happened when we did that? Our funded status actually went up. It actually improved our funding status. And this is going to be a little counterintuitive. It actually improved our funding status. However, our unfunded liability also went up. Basically, what happened was the entire program grew. Our present value went from $400 or $500 million to $721 million. Our unfunded liability went from $107 million to $134 million. We've added almost $20 million of unfunded liability. And while that number is a smaller percentage of the total program, because the total program grew so much, that's another $20 million that you're going to be in the hole. So adding people actually adds dollars. So what's really going on here is that the current program, the way it's currently priced, is we're saying we're only collecting about 90%. I'm not exactly sure what the right number is, but for example, we're only collecting about 90% of what we're going to pay out. We're only 72% funded. So adding more money brings us closer to the 90%, and eventually we'll get there. We push the year installment out, basically because we have infusion of new money, we have a bigger hole that we will hit a little later out. So we're solving till the year 2029, but now we have a much bigger hole. So that's the issue with adding new entrants. So really what we want to do is we want to get to the point where we can add new entrants and keep the program in the same or put it in better condition. And that's what we want to talk about, changing the way that we're pricing the program. So it really is all about pricing. I mean, the pricing is really very, very key. We want to get that fixed. Any questions so far? So everybody still with me?
Yes, please. Just one thing on that. On your 2014 to 2023, your actual investment return number changes, the percentage number?
Mm-hmm.
I missed the explanation on what
Well, this is coming from the expectations from your investment consultant.
Okay.
This was from you guys?
So that,
It was more exam.
so that doesn't, but the 6.76 that you got, okay, that's your valuation, but not necessarily your expected return.
This one is the valuation interest rate. This one, they have to be the same because I entered it, but this one is actually the average of all of these, the geometric average. So we look at these and just estimate what the average is. That's just a calculated number for the spreadsheet. The other one's an input number. All right, everybody still with me? All right, I'm gonna back this up a little bit. I'm gonna bring these people back out. So I'm gonna bring the funded status back to 74%. We've got the investment return of 7.6%. We played with a lot of different numbers here. What I want to see that what I want to do is take a look at the actual experience before we start playing with the pricing. What would happen if the tuition increase assumption was different than what we expected? Where does that help us out? And so let's say we kept it at 1.5%. Well, now we're 102% funded, and we don't run out of money.
Well, there's the answer.
Should we adjourn right now? Motion?
I do not follow that. So this is one of the things that we've discussed with staff, or staff has discussed with us, is what would happen if we capped what Mpact paid out to the schools. Could we fix the legacy problems in that way? So really what we're talking about, we have two different issues here. We've got the ongoing issues that we want to fix by changing the way we're pricing, and then we've got the legacy issues for those people that are currently in the program, and we want to look at both of those. The answers might be different for each group.
How does that fix the legacy problem?
Does that fix the legacy problem? The state doesn't have to come up with money. Assuming that these assumptions are actually realized. If these assumptions are realized here, and you cap the tuition at 1.5%, then Mpact has enough money to satisfy their contractual obligations.
Which you would be paying out, Mpact would be paying out less tuition than was originally priced in the present, the existing
For
contract.
the contract holders.
So if IH Young Community Colleges would agree to do that, just for those 22,000 participants, and we've got it broken down by how many are out there, how they matriculate, it would immediately take us into a solvent state.
The problem, as I see it, with doing that is if tuition goes up more than that, then the students that didn't invest in Mpact are funding those that were in Mpact.
That's very possible.
So you're charging students that didn't invest, part of their tuition is going to cover this loss.
That's one alternative. The other alternative is that the state subsidy kicks in more to keep the tuition down. So, but basically, I think you're right. The money's got to come from somewhere. Tuition, the cost of providing the education is in fact going up. And so if you cap one small group, you've got to bring it from other groups. Yes, I agree with that.
On a present value basis, that $100 million unfunded from Impact's perspective has gone away in this scenario. It doesn't mean it's disappeared, it's just moved. Essentially, it's moved to universities by capping the tuition.
Well, you move it to students. I mean, students have to pay for it
Move it to
because
someone, yeah.
it moves to someone, and the likelihood of receiving additional dollars from the state, significant additional dollars from the state, is pretty low. I mean, if you just look, we're going to use assumptions, we look at historical numbers. I mean, a decade ago, appropriations were 65% of funding, and tuition was 35%, and that number's completely flipped. Mm-hmm. And so, assuming that, I don't think it would be wise to assume that that scenario is going to change. And so then you are funding this model on the backs of students that don't invest in the program.
And you run a risk by doing that. I mean, it could be under all the students that don't invest in the program. It could be under out-of-state students, because traditionally they're subsidized. They're not subsidized. They don't have subsidized tuition. But you run the risk of wherever you move it to, that group ends up becoming too expensive and they go away. And then you actually lose it. So, for example, if you say, well, we're gonna just put a surcharge on out-of-state students. So we'll make this up by capping this here for the Mpact students, and we'll raise the out-of-state tuition for all the out-of-state students. It could be that increase in tuition is so great, you no longer have any out-of-state tuition students.
That's exactly right.
And then you got to find another source. So that is the danger in that. That is a possibility. We recognize that. But this, we want to illustrate this. We're concerned right now with basically Mpact, how to make it solvable. This is a possibility to make Mpact solvable.
I wanted to point out to everybody, this chart, the folder that I gave y'all when we came back from break, this chart is in that folder. This gives you an idea of how many of the Mpact students that go to junior colleges and universities, what percentage the Mpact students are of the actual population. With junior colleges, it's about 1 to 2%, and with the four-year universities, it's about 3 to 4%.
I've got a question that's probably an unfair question, but just say we had the new investment law passed that we were trying to get passed this year. Say we get it passed next year, give us some new opportunities with how and what we can invest in. Is it safe to say that we could maybe produce more than the average of 6.76%? That'd be probably a question for Morgan Stanley. If we had the law that we'll go back for in this next legislative session to open up flexibility to our investment options, if we had that, would you think that would be significant enough that we could improve our 6.76% anticipated investment earnings?
The answer is yes, you could. But what I think you're really asking is would you? And the answer to that is probably, if you could expand your horizons a bit and see part of, you saw me talk about up capture and down capture. You're going to have good years and you're going to have bad years, and you get to be able to transport the good years and shore up the bad years because your need is constant. And so where there are some limitations in what we're allowed to invest in, that's probably the bigger problem for us as opposed to trying to hit 7.9 or 7.1 or whatever it was. Our challenge is going to be really trying to keep more of a steady path, a steady trajectory, and take some of that wild swing out. That's where you lose. The deeper you do the hole, the harder it is to climb out. That's why it's so important that your risk metrics on the managers and these sectors, for instance, one of the things I'm referring to, and I almost hesitate to say this, but it's alternative investments with your hedge funds, where we are dealing with large endowments and foundations. In 2008, they absolutely saved us. They saved us again in 2011. So we're in 2011, 2008, we still experienced losses. We didn't experience anything like what people in traditional portfolios like this one experience. And so therefore we climbed out a lot faster.
Let me turn this question a little bit to you. Let's say we did make those changes in the investment policy. What do you think would be a realistic rate of return? Established. Is it 8%?
8.5%.
8.5%. Okay, so let's take a look at what that would do. So what I'm going to show you here is, so that would mean that our average tuition that we actually realize is 8.66%. It's a little bit higher because we know what this first year is. This first year is 12%. So you've got 8.5% every year thereafter. You've got 12% the first year. That averages out to 8.6% for the period. You're solvent until 2026.
And I know I keep talking about this, but I really think a bigger issue than getting from 7.6 to 8.5 or whatever is this pricing around how we charge. I mean, if 50% of the students are getting an additional 20% benefit, that's an enormous hit on the plan. If it's taking 50% of the students a fifth year because they're taking 12 to 14 hours, averaging 12 to 14 hours, or 15 hours, and so we were paying for an additional year at whatever the tuition rate is, that's an enormous hit, it appears to me, that could really move the numbers, and that seems to be a more important issue that we need to wrap our hands around rather than trying to guess what the market's going to do over the next 20 years, because there's no way to guess what the market's going to do.
Right.
I mean, it's a guess at best, and we can bring some.
So it is. Remember, there are two issues. There's the legacy cost, and there's fixing the contract for new contracts. What you're describing is fixing the price for the new contracts.
Well, maybe it depends on how the contracts are written, because unless we're guaranteeing a certain number of hours in the contracts, and I don't know what that says. I don't know. I mean, if the contracts. I think it really depends on what's in the contracts.
Okay.
If they guarantee a number of hours, then yeah, we got a problem.
Yeah, I don't think that that's going to be an option. I mean, I don't want to say 100%. I want to get the AG's office to weigh in on that, but I really don't think changing the amount of benefits for current contract.
But I'm not talking about changing the amount of benefits. The
credit hours are spelled out in the rules and regulations. The number of credit hours. And so really it kind of goes back to your question earlier, are those staggered?
Yeah, because the policy doesn't match up with reality. And I mean, I think that is a bigger issue than anything that we're dealing with.
And we agree. I mean, certainly the policies and procedures need to be scrubbed, started over, and be more compatible. Until we unearth all this, we've not had the opportunity to marry those two up.
I think it's hard to do anything other than just say a bunch of what ifs until we understand the answers to some of these other questions. Because answering these questions about legacy really could lead you down very different pathways.
I do want to show you something else here, because it kind of ties into what we're talking about with this issue in terms of fixing the contracts going forward before we get too far afoot here. What we have here, this is kind of we'll put down as the base situation. So we went back to the 5.5% for the 6 years, with 6.5% and 7%. So an average of 6.76%. Net evaluation assumption of 6.76%. See that? Unfunded liability of 107, 74% funded, insolvent 2024. So now I'm going to add the 1,000 and the 300 here. And remember that was 107 unfunded, not 134. So now I'm going to fix the pricing. I'm going to put in the 2.6% bias load. I'm going to put in the 5% expense load. And I'm going to put in a 10% reserve load. So you're charging participants for the risk. That actually brings the funded status up to 88%. It brings your insolvent year out to 2030 and brings your unfunded liability down to $84 million. So it's a little bit higher than where you're at right now because you have some losses in the pipes here, these 5.5%, before you get back to your average. But it gives you a little bit more time. It kind of tells you that, the message here, what we're trying to show you here in this message is that we think that this is a good program. We would like to see it reopen. I'm very fond of the structure of this program, but it's important to make sure that the pricing is fixed before you reopen it. And you can certainly take a piecewise approach to doing this. Get the pricing fixed and then look at the legacy costs, do the legacy costs and then fix the pricing. But just be mindful, what we're trying to say is don't just jump into this with your eyes closed. This program needs constant review and monitoring. And we're not faulting, we're not saying that there's an intrinsic problem with the program. When the program was put in place in 1997, was it? The investment market there was a boom. You guys were over 100% funded in the first 5 years or so. And so that was, we had a lot of positive experience in those first 5 years, but then the economy changed and the program didn't evolve with it. And so what we would like, basically what we're trying to illustrate is that we need to put together a process that allows you to evolve the program as your surroundings change. As the economy changes around you, you want a program that's flexible enough to evolve with it so that it can be sustainable over generations.
So I would assume that the new enrollees would pay about 17% more than the current enrollees.
Mm-hmm. Under the scenario, yes. And these are, that's one set of numbers that we put together. That doesn't mean that that's the end all that you're going to establish. Now, one of the things that you have to look at here is that this is, even though I put this together, I'm still charging them at the 7.3%. I didn't change that pricing assumption up there for the interest rate. If I change that to max evaluation, it's going to look even better. Now we're 90% funded. And our unfunded liability actually dropped below the baseline. We're now only 70%, or $71 million underfunded.
Wonder, can you make an adjustment to the number of enrollees? Because I wonder if the price point is going to drive down enrollment.
Yes.
So could you maybe say half for both?
500 and 150? Yep, we're back up to almost $90 million unfunded now. But you're absolutely right. That's one of the things you're going to have to weigh is fixing the pricing. Are we going to scare people away, or are we going to push them out of unaffordability in some manner? And what we have going on here with this pricing is we're doing it on an annual basis, and we're assuming that the collection and the payout have been in sync, so that there's not a gain or loss intrinsically involved in this hourly conversion.
What kind of enrollment have we seen typically? The numbers?
Generally, annually, it's about 1,300, which is why he was using those numbers. We range around 1,300 to 1,500.
Now, to give you kind of an idea, the 2014 lump sum cost here is about $30 million under this pricing model. And that's for a new, that's for a 12th grade. And that compares with, was it 25,886?
Yeah.
For 2013. We're talking about $4,000 or $5,000 more. It doesn't.
It's spread out over 10 years, if someone else in the program earlier, it would not be that much each year.
That's right. And we're assuming that they're making payments over a 7-year period. Now, again, one of the other options, and we haven't really even talked about this at all, is the payment plan. There is this, and I hesitate to throw too many interest rates out at you at one time, but there is this third set of interest rates. And it's actually one of the things that's kind of buoyed the system a little bit, is when people take a payment plan, you're charging them, I guess we did talk about this a little bit, you're charging them 7.8% to take a payment plan. It's almost like they're getting a loan from the bank, and they're paying the bank back 7.8%. And so we have that 7.8% still based in here. So on the money that's outstanding, on the contracts that are owed, you're actually earning 7.8% on that basis under this scenario that we just painted out here, even though on the assets you actually have on deposit, you don't achieve that in any of the years except for the year that's passed. And so that's one of the other things that you're going to want to look at when you're setting up this assumption or setting up this pricing model. If you're going to give somebody the flexibility to make payments on it, how are you going to charge them to make those payments? Are you going to charge them an interest rate that's what the average of what you're going to assume? Are you going to charge them something that they would see in a bank? Are you charging something in between? Are you going to charge them for the flexibility of making payments? That's all a policy decision point that you have to make here. There is a lot to this. Anybody scared of anybody? You guys got quiet out.
We're scared.
All right.
So we had lunch before we started this far.
You've actually given us a little bit of hope here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is a fixable situation. You know, given that the decade of 2000 was a 0% rate of return, and the fact that you're not 50% funded suggests that there were some very good elements in the pricing model that kind of buoyed your results. You couldn't overwhelm the decade of the 2000s and your average of 4.8% return, but it helped you from completely falling out of the water. Falling into the water. Falling out of the sky. All right.
I will walk into the fire.
Where would you guys like to go with this now? What do you want to see?
Of course, you legislators, I mean, feel sure, I mean, speak up if you'd like to put a cash infusion in.
I would like to suggest what I think tuition will be over time, but just as sure as I do, it will be on every media outlet in the state before I get it out of my mouth. So, no offense.
Actually, that raises a very interesting procedural point for setting the pricing, for this board to consider when setting the pricing, is to get everybody at the table. Don't just operate in a vacuum with, we have our 6.5% tuition assumption, 6% of the two-year colleges. Get the input from the 4-year and 2-year colleges. Getting them engaged in the process of setting the pricing. Basically, this program benefits the colleges because they're getting the money from that. So it's really a two-way street. Both parties would benefit from having communication in the price setting process.
We would like to see you looking at a tool like this every year. When you're sitting down to make the annual pricing decision, you should be looking at a tool like this. And as David says, you should be getting input from the schools. Because by the time you're making the decision on the pricing, they probably have a pretty good idea of what next year's price increase is going to be. That should be built into the pricing every year. That gets back to the short-term tuition increase assumptions. Let's not make it an assumption for next year. Let's make it what you know is going to happen or what's most likely going to happen. Build that in and remove that risk from the pricing. Remove that 1 year's risk from the pricing. Get that conversation going. look at this and look at the alternatives and look at the what-if scenarios and measure your risk and see where you are willing to take the risk from the program standpoint and where you're not willing to take the risk, where you want to charge for the risk and where you don't want to charge for the risk. Make it an annual review when you're setting the pricing.
So tell me, speak to the what again, how you set the what. Because frankly, I do think tuition increases in several of our institutions. I think we've reached a price point where it will be difficult to go much higher. Not at all of them, but at some of them. So I'm interested in...
The way the WAD is developed is looking at the total enrollment in all of the participating universities, looking at the tuition for each of those universities, and basically just weighting it by the number of total students.
Not by
the participants. Correct.
That's what bias looks like. So if you look at those numbers, basically we're saying that for Alcorn State University, 3,464 students is 5.15% of all students in state, resident students.
Right.
So they're 5% of the total. Their tuition gets weighted at 5%. So we take 5% of that. These guys are 26% of the total. We take 26% of their tuition and add it in. And we just sum all these pieces up, and that gives us the weighted average. So mathematically, if we were not weighting them, we would just basically, this is equivalent to taking the these numbers here, adding them up and dividing by 8.
Yeah. Have you looked at? Never mind.
Now to look at the specific impact participants, that's on this page. Right?
So it's just a bit higher.
You can see that there are 34,000 Mpact participants total, and again, looking at Alcorn State at the top, only 97 participate there. So where we had 5% of the state enrollment, there's only 0.28% of Mpact participants there. That's one of the less expensive universities, so that it's an indication of the bias people know are really expensive universities. Mississippi State, the participation there is 41% of the total. Mississippi State, where it was 26% of total enrollment.
U of M and Mississippi State are, that's 70% of your participants. Right there between those two columns. I forget what
This does not reflect.
It doesn't help us much.
Yeah, it's actually not a very large bias, but this does not reflect the pharmacy school and any other school that charges a different amount. We didn't have that information when we did the bias test.
I have maybe one comment or suggestion for consideration, and this really is as it pertains to the length of a contract or the situation where you have individuals that have reached a projected enrollment but actually don't attend, they're kind of lingering. Definitely, they're looking at a 4-year contract, and perhaps that's what's been guaranteed. But if they, let's say, enroll 5 years after the projected enrollment, the guaranteed payout would perhaps be those 4 initial years, the cost or at the rate that they should have paid had they attended the year that they reached a projected enrollment.
That's not a bad idea. That's I actually like that.
So if I was scheduled to enroll in 2012, that I deferred for 3 years, then you would incrementally start, 2020 start, but you're going to be paid out for 2014, 2015, 16, and 17.
And that would put the tuition risk onto the contract holders.
Yeah, you're still guaranteeing what they purchased.
For the contract holders that delay college.
How would that play into people doing military that?
I think that certainly those are exceptions that the program, would certainly.
I'm sorry,
People that pay enter the military, would you make different circumstances for them. You certainly could. You just could do different things.
I don't know if you just did, I know you're on our talk about, but let me get one evaluation question. Straight on, I mean, Dr. Mounts asked about the 5-year versus the hours issue on the tuition payout. Is any of that calculated in with our unfunded liability calculation? In other words, have we assumed any of that is going on?
No. Which means that things actually might be a little worse than what we're showing.
Okay, right. So to his point, it may be worse.
It may be worse. That's right. That's
If
absolutely
that's
right.
going on.
That's absolutely right.
That's going on. There's no question.
Now, there are also a couple of pluses and minuses here. If you go back to your last valuation, when you look at our numbers, we showed a 79% funded test. That's actually higher than what's shown in your valuation. And that's because we did something different for the projection tool than was done for the valuation basis. And that we reflected that nearly 50% of the payments are made not at the beginning of the year, but 3 months into the year and then 6 months into the year. 8 months into the year, September and February. So that the time value of money is helping you out there. And so while that piece is not built in and that's a negative, the time value of money for the payments within a year is also not built in because he's assuming that everything's getting paid out July 1.
Yeah, right.
So there's an offset there.
He's got me nervous because an extra year of college is another $6,000. Right. That's on a percentage basis.
Yes. Yes.
There is another, at the risk of drilling into yet more detail, in the valuation, there is another assumption that is actually slightly conservative. If you look at the projected tuition payments column, that first year, you see 31.8 million projected tuition payments coming out next year. That's if every contract that did start right on time. That's actually a much faster clip than what you're seeing being paid out. It's 22 million or about 20 million that's being paid out. So again, this reflects if every student enters college and goes full time and is in payment status immediately, whereas you have some people that are delaying. So the fact that we front loaded that benefit payment does make the liability a little bit higher than it might otherwise be.
The amount that we're going to be paying out is about to go up because historically, I mean, the plan's been open for 15 years, so our peak matriculation is scheduled for about 2015-16, so it is about to start going up higher than that 20, but it's been hovering around 20 in recent years.
Let me ask a payment question. Let's assume Johnny gets a half tuition scholarship. How does the payout work then?
It depends on how the universities invoice us. The universities, it depends on their invoice policy. I can tell you what happens, what I see happen a lot is if they get a scholarship, a lot of times the university will go ahead and bill us for the full tuition anyway. We have no way of knowing whether or not they have a scholarship. This is just from my experience dealing with customers. The university goes ahead, they bill us for full tuition, and then they apply that to the child's tuition. If there is an overage as a result from the scholarship, then the school usually reimburses the student. To add yet another layer of complexity.
In that case, there's a lot of double dipping if you go that 50 years.
Well, the truth of the matter is that really doesn't make a difference. The fifth year is the thing that really causes the problem.
Right.
Because regardless of how the cash flows, they still would get the dollars back, right?
Right.
They would just, you cut them a check or the university cuts them a check.
Right, and that you brought up a good point. If they actually applied the half tuition scholarship and we only paid half, then the student has the option of doing one of three things. They have the option of filling out a scholarship refund form for each semester. We refund them what we would have paid to the school, so it's the same amount of money if they didn't have a scholarship. They can hang on to it and do what Ken and David were talking about earlier, the refunds of unused hours. If they graduate and because they only used half of that 14 or that 12 hours that they may have taken, then they can get those refunds of unused hours once the child graduates, or they can actually hang on to it and use it for grad school.
Now, this gets into the nature of the promise. What exactly have you promised here? Have you promised a number of hours of school? Have you promised 4 years? Or have you promised a degree? I mean, what exactly are you promising? And you got to make sure that whatever you decide that is, that your refund procedures are consistent with that philosophy. And I'm not saying one way is the right way and one way is the wrong way, but it seems to me like we have a kind of a mixture here of different things. And in some cases, we seem to be promising hours. In some cases, we seem to be promising degrees. In some cases, we seem to be promising years. And in every case, we're benefiting the participant to the greatest extent. And Mpact is taking the loss in every case. And so there's no opportunity for averages to work out. We're not making gains on some people and losses on other people. We're just making losses. And so I think, this gets really to a root, a philosophical root. What is it that you want to promise out of this program?
I can't speak for everybody, but I think it's 8 full-time semesters. And if that means you are full-time in the fall and the spring and the summer, that's 3. I mean, given our tuition structure and system-wide policy, I don't know how Mpact can promise anything any differently. Because we know what the numbers are in terms of matriculation rates. Because we think we're promising 4 years, but they're actually receiving. Some are receiving more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a much bigger issue than we think.
Well, we think once you've made that decision, once you've figured out what the promise is, that hopefully we, could actually develop the pricing model to fit that promise, and develop the procedures that would help you price accordingly, price out the risk. You'll have some decision points to make. We think that you need to make that decision, and then we can move the program forward. One of the other things we talked about was, I'll just bring this up, just move the conversation along. The question was asked, could we have open enrollment all year round? And we think the answer is yes. We think you could actually have open enrollment all year round. It would take a change in the procedures that you're doing right now. But we think annually we could set up the pricing structure, and what we might see is that you have different pricing in the first quarter versus the second quarter versus the third quarter. But we think we could evaluate that beginning on July 1 and have all those basically established. Now, you might want to revisit it in the middle of the year just to make sure things aren't too far out of whack. You want to get those procedures set up. But we think that is a viable possibility if you want to go down that path. I think staff has handed out some options for discussion. Should we talk about those at this point?
It's time to all of the possible options.
Okay, option 1, do not reopen enrollment, honor all existing contracts, and open a new plan. And so in this case, basically Mpact would stand on its own. We would be zeroing out these new entrants here. So no new enrollees into this plan. We lock in the WAT to pay remaining contracts, and we lock it in at 1.2% is what we have in this one. All Mpact remaining contracts will be honored. However, only the legislature of the institutions of higher learning or both can make this decision. Develop a new plan. So this is where we would stand on that. We've got these assumptions that we got from your investment consultant plugged in here. We've got the cap on the tuition starting in 2014 of 1.2% increases. Pricing is irrelevant. We've got an evaluation assumption here showing at 7%, but the actual return over that period is 6.76%. this would put us at just over 100% funded, but we actually do run out of money in the very tail end. We're only about $1.5 million short. And that's because under this scenario, we've got a 7% valuation assumption, but we're not actually yielding it. So on the valuation date, it looks like we're there, but we do need a little bit more margin in that case for adverse experience. And so we might want to bring that down a little bit, cap it at maybe 1% instead of 1.2%. And that might just do it. Oops. Now it never runs out of money. And there's a little bit of margin. So you're 101% funded. And so that's one of the scenarios. That's kind of what scenario one would look like.
So you're just saying you have a university degree and the college is to 1%. Okay, now let's go to reality. What's that? It's not 1%.
Yeah. Well, this is an illustration of what it would take, and reality being different. We can't tell you what reality is, but it's if you're to put it in, I don't know how to put it, but to enter negotiations, you have to start with the endpoints.
And this is, you know, these are the options that are outlaid, and we just want to show you for these options that were developed, what would this look like in the model? And now these options are coming from basically from staff. This is what they put together after receiving our report.
What is the average increase we've been seeing in the four-year colleges and junior colleges tuition?
Well, believe it or not, it's close to your assumption. If you look at the last valuation, he actually has that detail in there for the history of the plan, and it's been real close to 6.5%, 6%. The junior colleges were a little less, I think. Do I remember that?
I don't remember the actual details. On average, over the whole life of the system, it's been close to the assumption. But what you have seen in the last couple of years is much higher than expected. So that's part of the reason you're feeling pain now, is because you're in an approximate tuition.
And I have, oh no, this is a price curve. That's in the value. History of tuition increases. Here we go.
Yeah, so you've had 3 years running, in some cases higher than expected. Yeah, the average column at the far right. Last year, 2012-13, you had a 9% tuition increase for the four-year colleges. Over the 20-year period, it's actually been a 4.8. It's been less than expected. So again, part of the reason you're feeling the pain now is because you're suffering from the acuteness of the current situation.
But there was more state support of the state universities in those earlier years.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah,
So they didn't have to raise their tuition so much.
That's a big problem that, you know, I'm not sure how we get around that. You've got a kind of a double whammy here. You've got the cost of providing education going up, and because we had this great recession, we had less money to subsidize that from the state. I mean, every state dealt with that. So state subsidies went down, and that compounded the increase that the tuition had to be passed on to the students. And so you had very large increases that actually were greater than the cost of providing the education. And theoretically, that can happen for a long time. Eventually, it's got to revert to the general inflation, but it might take 100 years. Because you've got the state subsidy that's going to leverage it for a long time.
And going back to the scenario we were looking at, cap tuition at 1%, that's what it would take to use just that tool to fix the problem. You have multiple tools at your disposal. So you can go part way on any one of the options. Now, every time we talk about a cash infusion, I see some squirming in this corner. So. But that is one of the options too. Again, you don't have to have the cash infusion be the full $100 million, but there is some, there's room to have some sharing of the burdens here. Some of the other options are with the new contracts, putting that margin, that extra load for reserving in there. Yes, you are having the new contracts build up a cushion, but that's another source of revenue for them.
And actually, let's see, what we could do here, just for kicks, just for the fun of it, let's put this back at
Put it the 20-year average.
Okay, 4.8.
4.8.
Not 41.
You like that,
Okay. What I wanted to show here is administrative expenses. I guess we can start there. We should start here. What if we had a cash infusion of $1 million? Yes, you do want to make it negative because that's expenses. And take that down away.
$1 million a year.
Yep. And that brought it up to 85%. So what would it take? What's the cash infusion that would take? Maybe it's 150, 100 million, 85. You do that? So you need 4 million, 4.3 million? That's close. That's good. Yeah. $5 million a year. There we go, 97%. So somewhere in the $5 million range per year with the 4.8% increases, average increases in this return pattern, not fixing the returns. So we would take a cash infusion of about $5 million per year.
How many years?
20?
I think it was 21 in the spreadsheet, but you can call it 20 for policy purposes.
Yeah, because we're not doing it the first year.
Yeah. Because there are two separate issues. How we take care of the legacy, how we move forward.
Okay. All right. So 1,300, and we want to price that out at maybe we want to set this at 6.5. Maybe we can set that at 7.5 for payments. Tuition increase assumption that we want, it's got to match 4.8. So we're already at 100% before we even use load for the reserve. What else you got? Well, that's right. I didn't take the $5 million. That's what you want, right? Senator?
No, I was just looking to see how it would look even if we're able to add.
Take $5 million out?
Oh, yeah. Wow.
That would okay, 93%. We're real close to this. We're in a similar position. So the $5 million, $4 million is real close to new entrants, and we might be able to fix that.
Again, that might be optimistic on the number of new entrants. That's the current clip that people are coming in. You might get half that if you raise the price, or 800, 200.
Yeah, but in this case, we're not actually raising the price because we lowered the tuition increase assumption.
Yeah,
So
okay.
in this scenario, if we're going to lock the tuition increase assumption at 4.8%, the pricing, $25,830, is real close to your 2012 pricing.
That's actually less, isn't it?
It is, a little bit. It is a little bit less. I mean, so you actually have some room to increase the funding reserve load. You could actually bring that up to 10%. Now we're at 95.5% funding. So there's a lot of ways you can slice this up.
Yeah, but I'd recommend that we go understand exactly what we can do with legacy.
I agree. In fact, this is probably a good time to have this next discussion. I think because of the nature of the complexity of our issues and the nature of where we're trying to take this forward, the direction for our college savings, I would recommend that we have discussion about doing like a lot of other boards do and have working committees so that we can break up and have groups of committees and then come back to the board. So we've got, group researching various things, and so we are more efficient with our time and our recommendations.
I agree. We did that in the beginning. I was on the marketing committee, right? Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that has existed in this. That structure has existed.
Good. So it was a working file.
Standard.
Excellent. So what we've got are just some committees just for you all to look at. But I think that will help us expedite, make some determinations to bring back to the board, look at a variety of different scenarios, look at a timeline. As Ken said, if this board opts to go to a year-round enrollment, probably the launch-off time is January the 1st because you'd like to open them up on the calendar year and do pricing back order. And that's certainly an option I think we have to consider. But I think if we look at these and you all make a determination, on which committees you're interested in, I think that would make our board much more productive. So I've just put out investment committee.
Could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I think there might be, I think you made a good point earlier. There might be some real value in bringing folks who don't necessarily just sit on this board to serve on these committees, like a large campus, a small campus, and a community college CFO who understand sort of price points and that kind of thing, so they can come back and help give us more realistic expectations about what tuition may do over short, medium, and long range. I'm just thinking about folks who are out there working with these numbers every day might be able. The other thing is, I think it's appropriate I think this board ought to expect that there is a consistent way that charges and all those types of things occur on campuses. I don't think you ought to get it 8 different ways or 15. There ought to be some. I think that's something that Eric and I can help with to make certain there's a consistent way to capture that.
I think that would be tremendous. If that is an issue. How many different ways we have to calculate and see payments. Well, I think that's a great idea, bringing in some subject matter experts. I think the first starting junction would be to look at these committees, see what you're interested in, let us see how you just match and get back in, and then we can go ahead and start doing some very intense working committees. Let those committees appropriately suggest the CFOs or whomever, or maybe some other individuals that were professions that we'd like to have on different committees. Sort of set it up as an investment, and these are some that historically see set up in other large boards that oversee monies. Investment committee, an audit committee, because again that's going to become one of our focal points as well, that we will stay very engaged all year long in the audit process, and then certainly rules and regulations. Again, that's an area that as we change our structure, we certainly have to change our policies and rules and regulations to match that. And as we've all talked about today, that's certainly been an issue on where we are with outdated regulations and policies that don't match up with the needs of this program. And then certainly an ad hoc would be like a special projects committee as things change and as we decide to look at other opportunities. Any questions about moving in that direction to work toward the goal of getting our program up more?
I think it's a great idea, and that's the way to do it. But the program, we closed it October last year.
September was the.
Is there any way, instead of waiting until January, that we could look at starting the program back up in September? We have to work hard, but I think
I think that would be definitive on how the committees work.
But we need to ask them to work fast.
Absolutely.
One, we're losing money with new enrollees if we decide to go that route. Secondly, we are, I think people, the longer it's closed, the less confidence our people are going to have in the program.
Well, except for the other factors, people want to be very comfortable and have a trust factor, knowing that when we do open it, we just didn't do it on the
And
fly.
that's what
We've
I'm
done it
saying.
very in-depth, we're very planned,
Well-
and I think they both bring good points to the table.
But I think
Absolutely.
in 4 months, we could, if we worked hard, we could have it done.
I think we can, I'll certainly try to do that. I'm for, there's a lot of work to be done, as you can all see. I mean, there's not just one little piece, but there's the
But a
multitude
lot of
of
work has
habits.
already been done.
Oh, they've done a fantastic job. I kudos to these guys.
We got quick options now. We just run with it now.
We do. We just have to all be solidified on what's the best. And you have to remember, too, that as we change our policies and procedures to match whichever routes we go, those have to go through the Administrative Procedures Act, which is a minimum of 60 days. So we know we have that. But once we get those even ready and passed by this board, it's, is that right, Corey? Or is it another 60 and then another 60? I can't remember. It's been changed. So it's a total of 60 days. So we know we have that tacked on to wherever we land in order to be in compliance.
Any systematic changes, a really good example would be the 10-year extension, or 10-year extension, 10-year guarantee period. Any kind of a change like that that's made to the program itself, that also requires a change in our records administrative system. So that takes reprogramming, literally going in and reprogramming. So that's something that's going to take man hours to reprogram, to test, to do all of that. So that it's not necessarily something that, okay, as soon as we make the decision, we amend the rules and regulations and that's that. That's not, it's not quite that quick. That and in accordance with the Secretary of State's rules, it's going to be very difficult to get something, going by September 1st. Not saying we couldn't try, but...
And then that brings up another point. As we do make these changes, as in any program when you would readjust, there probably will be some costs associated with reprogramming, how we handle that. So I don't know what the cost would be, but I just know that's normally when you reprogram any kind of
Are we
plan.
planning on meeting every month for the next several months? Then probably.
I think that would be, and it could be that, depending on which groups, you might end up have to meet twice a month. But I would encourage meeting, depending on the size of the group, face-to-face, conference call, whatever. I know we do that on several of the other boards that I've been on. And we stay very engaged. Sometimes it's not always face-to-face, but it's transfer of electronic documents and everybody's looking.
Madam Treasurer?
Yes, ma'am?
Is the current group, have they fulfilled their contract, or will they be available to the committees going forward to help them adjust data?
They will be available.
Okay.
And we have an RFQ out.
Well, we did in their contract, this was in the original scope of the program, we did have a provision in there that if we wanted them to do anything that was outside the scope of the original project, that they do have an hourly rate. So, and I also wanted to we do also want to let them have the opportunity to bid on the RFQ that we're going to have.
But
Well,
absolutely.
we wouldn't want to change another group until we get this nailed down.
Right.
And they've done a yeoman's task to sort through all this and to get us to where we are, to having these talking points.
I
Because
think
there's so many
to
factors.
folks' point, we ought to all be committed to moving forward with a real sense of urgency. I think it's important.
I agree. Because, the ultimate result is getting kids invested in education. So whether it's wanting to get somebody signed up, a parent, grandparent to get a child, that's exactly where we want to be. So that's our ultimate goal.
And and one other thing I know that the treasurer has actually mentioned as well is, we might want to think about having, if September 1 doesn't work, we might want to look at doing a shorter enrollment period. Something that's kind of temporary. So that's an option as well. I think enrollment period is something that's just on the table. So.
Well, we just need to hear what suits our program the best. But to me, this is a very exciting day. We've finally gotten to the point where we can have these discussions and look forward to getting this program reopened. and revitalized and really get out there and work across the state and get parents, grandparents, and others engaged in this. We want them to feel very comfortable to participate.
How has Max enrollment been this year? Has it been up?
Yes, it's up 16% in the first quarter. It's been a great, great tool for us to have available. We, everybody that calls that wants to get an impact, we share with them, hey, we have another program. And unfortunately, Max hasn't been as well known in the past, and so it's really given us, the silver lining is that it's given us an opportunity to make people aware of another opportunity that we have. Another good example of having the Max program as a tool is that if those people, whenever the Impact program does reopen, if they want to transfer those funds that they've already started saving into Impact, they can do that with no tax penalties. So we have a tool for people to start saving, start getting a tax deduction because it has the same tax benefits as Impact. So we've got a great tool at our disposal. So our call center at Intuition and our staff here at the Treasury has been recommending the Max program to everyone that's calls about the Impact program.
And the other thing that's been great about it is they've been out talking about Max and engaging these people to invest. And a lot of them are wanting to either continue to keep it because you can use it for different costs, your books and your dorms and so forth. So a lot of people enjoy having both programs. So I think we've done a great job, or the team has, of exposing the Max program.
One last big picture question.
A couple of questions. Is that for the committees that are established, do they have an end that they're working for? For example, has there been any buy-in of either one of these three strategies? And is there a charge to look at the recommendations that were given and go forth with them, or explore and come back with, we think this will work and these are our recommendations? I'm looking for kind of direction to the committee.
I think these will certainly be long-term committees. Okay. These are not just temporary. I think we will always want to continue to keep these committees in place as working committees. Right. Certainly the charge will be, we'll look at it and see how expeditiously we can get the initial results that we'd like to talk about enrollment as quickly as possible. So we have to have some discussion about timelines, but knowing that it is, of urgent nature.
And the specific recommendations that were given in the report, there were some specific ones for pricing, and some are very good. Some we can move with or not. Is that part of the committee's responsibilities to bring back to the board?
It will be. It will be. It will be the charge of that particular committee to explore that and come up with the best recommended process and bring it to the full board.
At one time we discussed back to the defined benefit plan of the college tuition that was going away. There was only one or two left in the U.S. How many? Do we know how many there are?
There's still not many. It's in your packet. There are four, and most of those have shifted the liability away from the full faith and credit of the taxpayers. They've moved it to institutions of higher learning and the community colleges. Because again, being the benefactors, that is where the big change has occurred. And some of those that are over 100% funded, those have definitely shifted the liability.
It's in your folder.
I guess if I actually read it else.
Oh. Yeah, they just said it.
Yeah, this is just another day. I think y'all had some information, but any more questions? What I do need you to do, if you got this filled out, if you'll please give it to Claire. We're going to go ahead and let her match them all up, get back with you, see how quickly we can get committees set up. I don't want to take up all your time doing that, trying to figure out dates. If we could move quickly on that and get some emails out to everyone as far as which committees you're serving on and see how we can move very quickly on those. Oh, we could, absolutely, that's a good thought. We probably should, originally, even though there have been committees in the past, and I don't know if it says it in our bylaws, but we should probably adopt or have a motion to approve this committee process before we actually.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? All opposed? Other business, very quickly. We have the race, the 5-29 race coming up Saturday. It's a walk, run, push a stroller, bring your grandkids, whatever you like to do, your dog, it doesn't matter. It's exciting. I'm going to let Claire talk a little bit, but it's coming up Saturday.
Yes, we are very, very excited. Everything's really coming together. It's been a lot of fun to plan. This is my first 5K that I've ever planned, and so it's been a learning experience. Who knew you needed porta potties at a 5K? I didn't know that. So I learned a lot. We want to make this an annual event. It's been very well received in the community. We have a lot of sponsors, both monetary and in-kind donors. They range from everywhere from banks to CPA firms. We have Morgan Stanley, who is one of our under contract. They actually did one of our big sponsors, and Tuition is also one of our sponsors. So we raised a lot of money, and what that has allowed us to do through sponsors and registration fees is give out college scholarships on race day. So we're planning to give out 14 college scholarships on race day. We're going to be giving away 8 to the winners of the fun run, and then we're going to be giving some away as door prizes, and then to the teams that have the most registered racers on race day. So we hope everyone, if you're able to get to Jackson, I know that several of our board members live in different corners of the state, but we would love for you to come. If you don't participate as an actual racer, then just come out and join the fun. We'll have face painting. You can get your face painted. We're going to have Trustmark actually. Trustmark actually is going to be manning and they actually donated the use of one of those big inflatable slides, so you can come enjoy that. And so anyway, we just hope everyone would be able to come out there if you're in the metro area or can make it that day. So it is going to be on Saturday. It starts at 8 o'clock. Fun run is at 9 o'clock. It's out at the Renaissance at Colony Park. So we hope everyone can come out and join us.
And is there a rain contingency?
We're still going to run in the rain. Yes, it is at the bottom of the registration form. Rain, shine, pothole. We're going to do it Saturday. But it's not supposed to rain. It's actually supposed to be really good running weather, like mid-60s. So.
Well, I sent that notice out to all the runners in the Oklahoma County area.
Good. We're excited. I mean, how many times can you have a race like this and you give scholarship money? That's pretty enticing. Any other business before the board? Need to make a motion to adjourn? Would you like to stay all afternoon? Second? All in favor?
Good job.